Tonight we follow Tyrion Lannister, small in stature, vast in mind, across roads of iron and dust, courtrooms and cellars, ships and storm-lit halls. Settle in, breathe, and let the story carry you. If this calms you, feel free to subscribe. It keeps these journeys coming. Where are you listening from? Now, quietly, to Casterly Rock, where his story begins. Chapter 1. Casterly Rock. Birth and boyhood. The rock rises like a sleeping lion, its flanks veined with gold and its halls carved deep into the mountain's heart. In that stone cradle, you meet a child who arrives out of season, small in body, yet loud in consequence. His mother does not survive the birth, and silence settles where lullabies might have lived. Tywin, Lord of the Keep, stands distant, a lighthouse that will not warm. Jaime leans close with an easy grin. Cersei turns away, winter flickering behind her eyes. Nurses whisper, servants glance, and courtiers practice neutrality as if it were a craft. The boy studies their faces before he can read their books, learning how the world edits itself around difference. Mockery lands early, sharp as grit underfoot. Yet he learns how to stand where laughter cannot reach. When the corridors stretch long, he times his steps to echoes, making rhythm from stone. A small hand rests on cold railings, measuring how far sight can travel when legs cannot. Years unfurl quietly, like banners removed after a tourney, folded without ceremony. A septon teaches letters, a steward teaches coin. A scarred master-at-arms refuses pity and offers balance, grip, and ways to fall without breaking. Tyrion reads everything, from ledgers to legends, and notices that both record debts. He learns that attention is a currency and humor its silver change. When asked a cruel question, he answers with a story and leaves the question smaller than before. At meals, the table speaks in codes. Compliments are wrapped around calculations. Toasts measure alliances more than thirst. Tyrion watches the flow of dishes as if they were troops, noting who waits, who reaches, who is served. He finds that a question asked at the right moment opens doors no key will. He keeps his voice calm, a soft knife that slices knots rather than ropes. Even wine becomes a tool, round and red as patience. He grows in the only way available to him, inward and outward at once. Inward with rooms full of thought, outward with jokes that leave bruises on the world instead of on himself. The rock's private gods are engineering and memory. He kneels to both. He follows tunnels that smell of dust and salt air until they surface at a narrow ledge. From there, the sea looks like hammered metal, steady, inevitable, teaching the lesson that pressure over time shapes stone. Tywin's regard remains a ledger that never balances. Praise is rationed, criticism arrives on time. Tyrion learns to treat each word from his father as both weather report and warning light. He discovers that approval is not love, and that lack of approval is not destiny. He begins to build a self that can withstand audits. If he cannot be the heir his father imagined, he will be the mind his house relies upon when the numbers refuse to lie. In the libraries, candles make small suns in alcoves, and dust floats like a slow galaxy. Tyrion traces trade routes with a fingertip and marks choke points where narrow straits govern wide fortunes. He reads about bridges and notices how power is often the right to name a crossing. He copies out a few wickedly clear sentences from a long-dead maester, then copies them again until they feel like tools in his hand. Words, he learns, are levers. Play finds him anyway. Jaime sneaks him to the battlements to watch the sunset turn gold to blood orange, and then to gray. They laugh at the same absurdities, and never at each other. Tyrion stores those evenings carefully, like coins in a hidden purse for leaner days. A single look from Cersei can drain the purse faster than he can fill it. but memory replenishes. The image of a lantern on a rainy night steadies him when rooms grow cold. As he ages, the world tries to seal him into the role of mascot or monster. He declines both. He chooses observer, then negotiator, then participant, each choice a measured step. When his tutor introduces the phrase corruptible testimony, he writes it down and adds a simpler note beside it. Some people lie for a living. He decides he will lie only as a last language and prefers irony over falsehood. Irony leaves the door open. Lies brick, it's shut. There is, in his youth, a meeting that sharpens him to a painful edge. He is shown a tenderness he believes is real, acts boldly, and then sees the truth twisted into punishment. The details cut, so we pass them lightly, noting only the outcome. He learns how love can be purchased, polluted, and weaponized. The lesson nests under all the others and hums. Afterward, he teaches himself to ask, before any promise, what the promise costs to keep. Seasons move across the rock with less ceremony than stories give them. Spring smells of wet latticework and new mortar. Autumn tastes of salt on the wind. Tyrion outgrows some rooms and grows into others, building a reputation that still fits in a pocket. He is not a knight, not an heir apparent, not a priest. He becomes something ordinary language struggles to name. A counselor in training, a student of leverage, a boy making a map of human weather. When he finally stands alone at a high window, the sea and the veins of torchlight below draw together in his mind like threads crossing a loom. He understands that power is not only mass and steel, but timing, placement and story. A tower falls if its base is hollow. A rumor spreads if its seed finds tired soil. He makes a quiet vow to be the person in any room who knows what the room is actually doing. The child of a mountain chooses flow over force, and in that choice, he discovers the shape of his future. It will serve him when doors appear locked. Often. Chapter 2. Lessons in Stone. Wit as armor. In a castle of echoing corridors, Tyrion learns to listen for the meaning that walks behind words. A compliment delivered too quickly hides a receipt. A threat told as a joke still points its knife. He practices holding silence until others fill it with uses and fears. When the room empties, he speaks to the chairs, reciting arguments until his tongue finds smooth paths. The habit makes him unhurried in company and precise when precision matters. He studies coin the way a mason studies plumb lines. Numbers tell the truth in a language that resists flattery. The Rock's accounts show the cost of banners, marriages, and distant loyalties that must be refreshed with silver. Tyrion traces the arithmetic of pride and sees how debt multiplies when honor will not bend. He imagines better bargains, not to hoard, but to steady the foundation. Gold is a promise. He wants the promises to hold. He finds allies in unremarked places, a seasoned porter who notices everything that passes the gate, a kitchen clerk who tallies spices as though the realm rests on cardamom, a falconer who listens to wind and understands patience. Tyrion learns names and keeps confidences, and in return hears the castle breathe. Information arrives like birds returning, not always on time, but often enough to warn of weather. He cultivates that flock without cages, letting trust work where fear would fail. Books ask him to sit still. Life asks him to move. He does both. One afternoon he studies siege ladders. That evening he watches masons reinforce a sea-facing wall. He thinks about where ladders would fail and why walls fall from neglect more than from assault. The observation drifts into a rule he repeats. The dangerous part of a structure is usually the part nobody questions. He applies it to traditions, to contracts, to the way rooms are arranged. When Tywin holds court, the Great Hall becomes a diagram of pressure. Petitioners seek weight behind their names. Rivals try to borrow thunder from proximity. Tyrion does not interrupt. He counts breaths between the Lord's words and marks how fear can make smart men foolish. Later, in chambers scented with tallow and ink, he tests alternative verdicts against the ledgers. Justice, he realizes, is a machine that requires maintenance. Without oil, it grinds the weakest first. Still, courage keeps visiting in quieter forms he can measure. It arrives when he admits doubt and continues anyway. It holds steady when others shout to cover fear. He finds bravery is a habit of attention, not a noise. Most days, that is enough for now indeed. He practices with weapons he can actually wield, not swords, though he learns to parry a sudden shove and to fall safely on stairs. He wields questions and learns to set them two at a time so answers must arrive balanced. He wields timing, letting a foolish boast ripen before harvesting its contradiction. He wields memory, recalling who said what in which mood. The armory of the mind grows methodically, each shelf labeled so he can find tools in haste. A steward introduces him to negotiation as performance. People need a way to save face, the steward says, or they'll burn down the bridge they have to cross. Tyrion watches two minor lords circle a grain dispute and sees how a concession framed as generosity becomes triumph for both. He sketches the structure, identify the thing the other side truly needs, then make it cheaper for them to accept than refuse. He will return to that sketch often. He also learns how to lose gracefully and how to leave a table before victory turns sour. There are nights when his best argument fails because the other person cannot afford to admit they heard it. There are mornings when compromise saves more than principle could. He notes these results without bitterness and adds a softer rule. Never close a door you may need to enter later. A pause is not surrender. It is a promise to try again. There is a journey close at hand, and he feels the pull like a current through stone. A king will travel north to pay respects, and the court will follow. Tyrion prepares as if for an examination he wrote himself. He packs books and blank pages, coin, a cloak lined against wind, and a willingness to be useful where he is not expected. Moving through the world will test his theories, and testing, he knows, turns study into skill. Before departure, he walks the lowest tunnels alone, counting heartbeats between torch brackets. The air tastes of old fires and wet minerals. He places his palm on the rock and thanks it for being harder than the words thrown at him. Then he smiles at the superstition and lets the habit stand. A single private ritual may steady a public life. He climbs the long stairs slowly, unbothered by the pace, already practicing the patience that will become his style. When dawn comes, the courtyard fills with hooves and steam, harness and chatter. Tyrion finds his pony, adjusts a strap, and says little. He looks smaller than the moment, but he knows better than to measure himself against spectacle. The journey will stretch him differently. It will ask for kindness that resists mockery, for watchfulness that avoids suspicion, for humor that never bites the wrong throat. He feels ready enough, which is the closest most people get to ready. The gate lifts, the road opens, and he passes under the portcullis like a coin sliding from a hand into daylight. Behind him, the rock keeps its counsel. Before him, riverland mud and northern frost wait to teach lessons that stone could not. He does not hurry the first mile. He begins with breath, then with observation, and then with the small pleasure of seeing the world widen. A new map unfolds, and he keeps both hands on it. Chapter 3. Northbound Winterfell and the Wall. Road dust softens the gold of the Lannister escort, and the wind tilts banners toward colder latitudes. Tyrion rides a pony with a patient gait, and studies every village green as if it were a ledger. Inns teach him which songs travel fastest and which rumors buy the cheapest rooms. He shares a fire with guards who have nothing to prove and everything to protect. The country opens like a book written in quiet ink. Winterfell rises out of trees and steam, rock warm with the breath of hot springs. Lord Eddard's hall is orderly, not ostentatious. The North prizes function over flourish. Tyrion notes the distinctions without judgment and keeps his courtesy simple. He sees children whose fates will bend the realm and a boy whose future has just been broken by a fall. The castle's godswood offers silence, and in that silence he measures what help he can offer quickly. He sketches a saddle designed to hold and guide a rider who cannot use his legs. A master smith considers, tests, and nods. Tyrion does not make a speech. He leaves instructions and coin, and asks for updates by Raven. Later he will hear that the boy rides again, wind touching a face that had expected only windows. Some solutions do not need to announce themselves. They simply work. And the world becomes bigger by a field's width. At table, the talk is of roads, harvests, and news from the south that has not yet hardened into fact. Tyrion listens, trades small truths for larger ones, and keeps the bargains soft-edged. He senses kindness in the Stark household, not theatrical, but bone-deep, and responds with restraint. He will not outpace their grief with wit. A single raised cup, in honest respect, is more welcome than a sword of words swung for sport. He walks the yard and watches men drill without flourish, noticing how discipline conserves strength. A small kindness offered to a stable boy returns later as a quiet warning about a storm. He thinks of systems again, how care belongs in the design of a place as much as drains do. Before dawn he visits the kennel, chuckles at the pups, and understands affection that does not need language. The North prefers straightforward weather, and he is learning that climate. The wall, when he reaches it, is not a rumor but an horizon. It rises blue-white, swallowing scale, old as the stories and colder than any joke can soften. The night's watch greets him with courtesy worn thin by scarcity. He finds men who made vows to give their days a shape and men who were given the vows in exchange for other sentences. The difference matters and does not. Work unites them where pride might divide. He shares ale with a boy who strains toward manhood and offers him counsel as if it were kindling in winter. Hold your head high, he suggests, and learn quickly without needing to show it. He does not glamorize hardship and does not scold softness. He remembers his own long apprenticeship to patience and offers that too in a story that makes the boy laugh. Advice, given gently, is a better coat than contempt. Castle Black's mess smells of onion and wood smoke. The old bear, Lord Commander Mormont, receives him with interest and a direct eye. Tyrion walks the top of the wall and lets the wind rinse his thoughts, then looks north across a forest that seems to be listening. He hears of rangers who do not return and of rumors that walk on frost. He files the knowledge under unfinished accounts, a ledger without columns yet suitable for attention. If oath feels like heavy cloth to some, he sees how it fits others like a well-made cloak. The Watcher's vow is simple: guard the realms of men, take no wife, hold no land, father no children. It seems a subtraction, but it grants one addition: purpose. Tyrion respects that clarity even as he knows it is not his path. He offers coin for the Order's needs and words for its morale, then prepares to turn south. On the return journey, he rides with an easier posture, winter breathing at his back. He carries a sketch of the wall in his head and of Winterfell in his chest. He drafts letters in silence, placing compliments like beams where roofs sag. He imagines 6 different futures and chooses to remain undecided. Flexibility is its own armor. At a crossroads inn, Ailey tastes of iron, and the air hums with intersecting stories. One of them reaches for him. He sends a careful letter south, describing the Watcher's dwindling stores, signed not with boasts, but with a steward's calm tone. In it, he suggests what any lord can spare: grain, wool, hands to mend torn roofs before deeper cold. He does not predict catastrophe. He merely notes that preparedness is cheaper than regret. The Maester promises to send the ravens. Tyrion tucks away a small sense of usefulness, the kind that warms without drawing attention. A quiet lantern hung on a high wall still lights the road below. On a last walk before departing, he stands beneath the shadow of the wall and studies how light changes its face. Morning softens edges. Afternoon reveals fine cracks that only time makes. He thinks of Winterfell's hot springs threading warmth through rock, and of families who keep each other standing because the ground is hard. The North has a way of making truths simple and deep. When he turns his pony south, he is not taller, but he is steadier, and steadiness travels. The road narrows into commerce and gossip near the Trident. The inn is warm, crowded, bright with suspicion. He chooses a corner, a cup, and the habit of listening. A familiar name drifts across the room, then steps closer, slowly. Chapter 4. The Inn at the Crossroads, Seizure and the Eyrie. Names can stand up like spears in a crowded room. Tyrion Lannister is spoken not as greeting but as charge, and the air shifts. Catelyn Stark's hand is firm on his shoulder, her voice measured and public, inviting the North's loyalty to become a net. Tyrion does not fight the moment. He understands theater when he sees it. He is claimed in the name of justice and marched toward the mountains where her sister rules. The high road coils like a question up the spine of the Vale, stone shoulders dropping into ravines that accept mistakes without argument. Guards keep a hard pace. Night winds scrape through armor and bone. Tyrion survives by conversation and calculation, making himself lighter to their resentment by telling stories that warm, cold hours. He watches the hills for movement and the faces for intention. A single kindness traded for a loaf can smooth a mile of trail. The Eyrie appears, a white talon clutched around sky, reached by mule track and stairs that argue with height. Inside Lysa Arryn's court is a room built for echo. Her son plays with danger as if it were a toy, and the gathered nobles watch justice dress in unusual clothes. Tyrion requests due process and receives a cell that opens onto nothing. The sky cell's floor slopes toward the blue, teaching even the brave to sleep carefully. He learns the habits of a prison that relies more on gravity than on bars. Bread arrives hard enough to last. Water arrives cold and honest. A jailer enjoys his jokes enough to deliver messages for coin and amusement. Tyrion keeps his mind working, composing arguments, practicing empathy for those who cannot use it, and listening for footsteps that mean news. He remembers lessons about how fear makes rooms smaller and decides to expand this one with thought. In the hall, words parade. Lysa stages the accusation as a lesson for the room, heavy on certainty and light on proof. Tyrion answers with restraint, even when prompted toward fury, and then chooses a different path. He demands trial by combat, an old law that settles guilt or innocence not by evidence, but by a fight between champions. The principle is brutal theater. The gods decide through the duel's outcome. The practice, however, can be fairer than people. He cannot fight for himself and does not pretend otherwise. He offers gold, promises, humor, and time to those who might stand for him. A sellsword named Bronn accepts. not out of love or loyalty, but because the terms make sense. Tyrion respects that clarity. Motives do not have to be noble to be reliable. They have to be aligned. The room finds its edge. A path opens where moments before there was only wall. The duel is a lesson in angles. The Knight of the Gate is heavy and proud, a fortress in motion. Bronn is economy and air, giving ground until ground gives impossibilities. Steel rings, armor labors, and on a misstep the weight becomes judgment. The fall is long and final. Tyrion's breath returns before applause does. The verdict is not celebrated, it is accepted. He is declared free with words that taste like iron and relief. Freedom, however, is not friendship. He takes care to leave the Vale without crowing, pockets lighter from necessary generosity, mind heavier with revised maps. He understands that law can be both ladder and trap, and that knowing when to use it is a craft. Catelyn's righteousness has not disappeared. It has only been redirected by rules she cannot ignore. Tyrion measures his own anger again and chooses to fold it small and keep walking. He thinks often afterward of the sky cell's slanted floor and how it trained the body to negotiate with fear. It taught him to sleep on purpose, to wake with a plan, and to weigh every gesture against gravity. The memory becomes a private measure. Whenever a room feels tilted by politics or grief, he checks his footing, adjusts his words, and waits for the angle to favor him. The habit saves him more than once. The journey ends, for now, at a war camp where his father's banners look like a forest tamed by cloth. Tywin's gaze is cool, his welcome utilitarian. Tyrion is given a place at the table and a task that sounds like insult until he studies it. He is to command irregulars, men as unwanted as he often feels, and shape them into something that won't break on first contact. It is a challenge made of contradictions, which suits him. Night in camp smells of smoke and boiled leather. Tyrion learns the rhythm of reports and the understatement of scouts. He shifts small resources so competence has room to work. He rewards courage quietly and shields it in daylight. Interest grows on such deposits when fear runs high. Letter by letter, he writes to the capital with measured alarms and practical suggestions. He avoids drama and requests tools, nails, rope, accurate accounts, messengers who can count. He has learned that the simplest lack can undo the grandest plan. His father notices the improvements and says little. The absence of rebuke is its own currency in that tent. Tyrion deposits it and continues, bent to the work more than to the banner above it. If the Vale taught him how law can cut both ways, the camp teaches him how logistics hold the blade. By the time dawn pinks the canvas edges, he sees a shape for himself that he can accept. Not hero, not heir, but hinge. Small, strong, able to turn heavy doors with well-placed effort. It is enough for now. The road will call him south soon, toward a city that eats plants for breakfast and asks for more by noon. Carefully, he breathes, then walks on, steadily. Chapter 5. War Camp. Arithmetic serving Tywin. Tents bloom along a riverbank like a city that knows it will not last. Banners mark claims, smoke marks kitchens, the ground remembers hooves. Tyrion walks the lanes with an accountant's eye, counting what feeds victory and what feeds stories told afterward. He speaks to quartermasters before captains, because a hungry army is a rumor waiting to burn. The math of war is grain, iron, time, and the will to keep moving. Tywin's pavilion is a geography lesson in power. Maps spread like low hills, weighted by cups and knives, and attendants move as if sound were another rank. Tywin measures his son with a glance that offers neither warmth nor contempt, only a calculation. He assigns Tyrion men who do not belong anywhere else. Rough fighters from the hills, short on discipline, long on pride. Tyrion recognizes the mirror and does not flinch. He asks for translators, coin, and patience. The Hill clans arrive bristling with grievance and possibility. They want armor bright as promises and plunder measured in loud chests. They want respect paid in plain words. Tyrion does not preach. He bargains. The realm has many swords, few are offered terms. He offers them iron, shares of booty honestly counted, and the right to leave when their contract ends. By treating them as partners rather than fodder, he buys loyalty at a price men can endure. He learns quickly that courage shows up in different uniforms. Some men are brave against enemies and hopeless against boredom. Others can wait, then act without fuss. He arranges duty so each can succeed without resenting the others. He pairs talkers with listeners and steadies the camp's noise. He notices the way a single raid can sour 20 good patrols in memory, and he plans small successes that refresh belief. Morale, like coin, works best in circulation. When a battle comes, it is arranged without asking his permission. The hillmen will screen a flank while the main force engages. Tyrion explains, checks straps and straps again, then rides where he can see but not steal anyone's work. The morning is noise and flags and a bloom of dust that tastes of old stone. He thinks of the sky cell's drop and of the wall's height and steadies his breath. Then accident interrupts intention. A wild swing from a friendly hammer kisses his helmet and subtracts him from the story. He wakes after the shouting has traveled on and victory has been counted, his head aching with absence. The result is a lesson he will remember longer than the bruise. Presence matters less than preparation. Influence is the work done before the moment, not the pose taken during it. He laughs softly, then winces, and orders food for the men who bled. Tywin says little about the mishap and less about the win. He pivots to logistics with the speed of weather, already measuring the next front with a ruler only he can see. Letters from the capital arrive with news that the city behaves like fire near dry timber. Kings need governing even when they do not want to be governed. Tywin studies Tyrion over a cup, then lays down a command that feels colder than congratulations. The capital requires a hand. Tywin will not sit the city's chair, while the war requires his weight in the field. Tyrion is to go south as acting hand, carry the Lannister will in words rather than in sieges, and prevent folly from setting the whole board alight. The order lands like a stone in a calm basin. Tyrion's ripples are private. Relief at leaving a father's gravity, dread of entering a court's undertow, and the sharp curiosity that has always saved him. He prepares to travel as if he were packing a small, movable office. He gathers ledgers, seals, a map of the city with notes from previous visits, and a list of names that can be trusted to keep news accurate. He takes Bronn because clarity and steel travel well, and a few servants who understand discretion. He leaves the hillmen with contracts fulfilled and respect expressed. People are more likely to return to places where they were paid fairly. Night before departure, he walks the perimeter and listens to stew ladles and sentries' boots. Leadership, he decides, is less a trumpet than a lantern at a fork. He is not sentimental. He is attentive. He counts promises he can still keep, then sleeps lightly through the dark. Midway south, he intercepts a rumor that tastes like truth. The capital is trusting fear more than forethought. In such weather, small officials swell into obstacles and bold fools into captains. He refines his plan. He will test loyalties by varying stories, gauge the city's appetite for cruelty, and change incentives before he changes laws. Punishment may frighten, but only systems can calm. He wants the city to breathe longer breaths so reason can be heard again. He rehearses conversations he will have with people who cannot afford to lose face. He shapes sentences that let others keep their dignity while they change course. He chooses where to be blunt and where to let time perform the soft correction. He knows the name of his real opponent is not a person but entropy, the tendency of any court to fall apart into private feasts and public shortages. Discipline, applied kindly, will be his counterspell. As the walls of King's Landing rise from heat and glare, he measures the city by smell and sound before sight. Fish, tar, ink, and the complicated breath of crowds. He thinks of canals that must be cleared, ledgers that must be corrected, and tempers that must be cooled. The hand's chain is waiting for someone to wear it without mistaking jewelry for duty. Tyrion's shoulders are not broad, but they are willing. He prepares to lift. Chapter 6. Acting Hand in King's Landing. The city rises from heat and tide, smelling of tar, fish, and ink. Tyrion enters quietly, carrying paper authority and a memory for names. The small council watches him as if he were a traveling storm, unpredictable but useful if harnessed. He answers with courtesy sharpened by intent and begins with inventory rather than threats. Goodwill, he knows, must be created before it can be spent. He tests the court by telling 3 versions of one harmless plan to 3 different listeners. A day later, his words return dressed as rumor, and the path of the leak glows like a wick. He does not roar. He adjusts incentives, trades embarrassment for employment elsewhere, and seals one hole without making a spectacle. People breathe easier when punishment does not masquerade as sport. Quiet repairs steady the building. Cersei arrives like a drawn curtain, her gaze bright and cold. She holds the king's temper in one hand and family pride in the other, and she will not let either be questioned. Tyrion offers her a bargain of boundaries. He will keep the city standing if she stops knocking out supports. She laughs until he does something she did not expect. He moves Myrcella gently toward Dawn, packaged as alliance and safety, both. The plan is simple, cause and effect. Dawn values honor and hostages. A princess fostered there becomes a bridge where cliffs once faced each other. The city loses one pawn, gains a wall of sand and spears, and the sea road grows less dangerous. Cersei calls it theft, and then, when the letters return accepting the match, calls it treason by another name. Tyrion lets the result speak. A quieter harbor is its own argument. He walks the streets without banners and counts how bread lines turn to anger when the sun drops. He finds the guilds that can stretch flour, the bakers who will not cheat, the cellars where grain can be stored against panic. He meets the alchemists too, keepers of wildfire, a green liquid fire that burns water and stone alike. Their vaults are fuller than anyone guessed. He files the fact, careful as a man sheathing a knife. The city watch, gold cloaks frayed at the edges, has been fed with promises and given little else. Tyrion replaces a few loud captains with quiet ones who read orders before swinging clubs. He pays wages on time and asks for accountability with the same punctuality. When a patrol harms a poor street for sport, punishment arrives without trumpets and in proportion to the harm. The message travels faster than fear because it comes with bread. Joffrey, a boy crowned and stung by his own reflections, wants spectacle. Tyrion answers with boundaries that sound like choices. He redirects the worst impulses into appearances that waste only hours, not lives. He does not flatter cruelty with attention. Where a cruelty would echo, he places a diversion. Where it would wound, he makes it boring. It is not heroism, it is management, and it holds long enough to matter. Letters from the Coast report, sails gathering like storm birds. Stannis Baratheon, stubborn as granite and certain as sunrise, declares his claim and moves. Tyrion maps what he controls and what he can only influence. He orders a harbor chain to be forged and anchored in secret, links heavy as verdicts to be raised when the enemy sails commit. He knows the city will need more than steel and luck. It will need time bought with thought. He coordinates with shipwrights, carpenters, and smiths who value clarity over flattery. He sits in their yards, listens to their methods, and adjusts schedules without scolding. A single delay at the wrong hinge can undo a month. He learns how tar bubbles, how rope fails, and how men approach impossible tasks more calmly when someone witnesses the effort. Supervising becomes a kind of prayer, attention offered without vanity. At night, he shares wine with Bronn and asks for plain answers, not comfortable ones. Bronn offers them, weighing plans like blades in his palm. Shay waits in a hidden room, a door away from the city's appetite, and with her Tyrion allows the mask to loosen. He knows the danger of marrying tenderness to secrecy and chooses it anyway, counting the risk against the warmth that steadies him in daylight. Balance is rarely achieved. It is maintained. The ravenry grows busier. Coasts watch for fire. Markets strain. In the council chamber, Littlefinger smiles like a man counting eggs while selling feathers, and Varys glides through conversations, leaving them gentler than he found them. Tyrion triangulates between these currents, asking each for truths they do not mind sharing, and weighing the parts they choose to hide. His work is not dramatic. It is deliberate, and it buys the city mornings. When the first watchers spot sails, the plan compresses into hours. He stations Wildfire along chosen lanes in the bay, raises the chain just enough to be ready, and instructs the bells to speak calmly. Panic ruins more cities than armies do. He reminds the captains that fear is a weather, not a verdict, and that every crew that holds position adds a brick to the wall. The sun lowers. Fires will answer fires soon. On the eve of battle, he visits the gates and speaks not of glory, but of neighbors. Defend the man beside you, and the city defends itself. He does not pretend invulnerability. He offers likelihoods, tools, and the promise that he will be where the danger is thickest that can still be shaped by words. Then he sleeps a measured sleep and wakes with his voice warm and his decisions already chosen. Dawn smells like tar and iron and wet rope. The tide lifts. The day begins. A gull cries over the Blackwater, a thin line of sound that threads the morning. Tyrion straightens his chain and breathes once, twice, then steps forward. Chapter 7. Wildfire and Chains. The Blackwater. The river mouth narrows like a throat, and the fleet that enters it trusts on momentum and nerve. From the walls, the city watches with eyes that pretend to be stone. Tyrion stands at the parapet, measuring distances by breath, feeling for the moment when preparation shifts into action. Nothing about the day is accidental. Almost everything about it will look like luck. A single ship leads, low in the water and heavy, crewed by men who know they will not be remembered by name. Hidden beneath planks, clay jars wait like coiled thoughts. Wildfire is an old alchemy, a green burning that devours water and clings to hull and man alike. Tyrion chose it not for spectacle, but for compression. Many enemies harmed at once, with defenders spared the cost of fresh courage on each boarding. Signals move along the walls, quiet as nods. Archers adjust, engines tilt, and the first torch arcs through sea air. When the fire kisses the slick, the bay becomes a garden no one wished to plant. Flames open like flowers that hate the rain. Crews freeze, then run, and the chain lifted now traps ships in sudden company. Cause meets effect with the simplicity of an axe. Strategy has become weather. Stannis presses forward because that is who he is. deliberate as iron. His captains try to unspool order from heat, turning men toward the beach and the gate. Tyrion sees where the line might hold and rides to it with a small escort. His voice does work that swords cannot. He speaks of doors behind them and children asleep within walls, and fear remembers it has a home to defend. The sortie begins as duty and becomes momentum. He leads not because he mistakes himself for a champion, but because proximity is a tool like any other. Men follow a person who shares the risk, especially when the plan asks for patience under fire. The fighting is close without being described. Steel argues with wood, and decisions made in quiet rooms discover whether they can stand in loud ones. Where a gap opens, he plugs it with timing, not muscle. Where a chance appears, he spends it carefully. On the water, commanders learn hard truths. A fire you think contained is not always a fire you can survive. On the walls, Tyrion's cues keep the chain tensioned, raised, lowered, and raised again, in sequences rehearsed with lantern light and precise speech. The city's heartbeat steadies into work. Bells stop sounding like panic and start sounding like plan. It is enough to keep the defenders acting rather than reacting. He collects small victories and tethers them together, each one a knot in a rope across the day. A burning hulk that might have become an accidental bridge is turned with poles and curses. A tower door that would have jammed is propped open with a beam prepared yesterday. An archer who shakes too hard to hold his line is given water and a task that does not require aiming. Tyrion keeps adjusting the machine in motion. When exhaustion tries to blur hours into sameness, a shock sharpens the edges. A Kingsguard knight, white cloak catching sparks, moves toward Tyrion with intention too smooth for safety. The strike, when it comes, is treacherous and close. Steel glances, bone shouts, and the world tilts. He tastes metal and hears the city continue working without him. He thinks, oddly, that the chain will hold because of how carefully the carpenters did their jobs. He is carried from the wall into a room that smells of vinegar, wool, and relief that refuses to call itself hope. He sleeps with the battle finishing without his eye on it. Men he trusted to understand the rhythm complete the measures. Ships that needed to die burn where the tide decides. At dawn, smoke writes an ugly script on the sky. The city still stands. The cost is counted in ledger lines that will be read without ceremony. Tyrion wakes to pain that redraws his face and to the quiet news that victory will be announced by other voices. Tywin's banners arrived in time to look like salvation, and the songs will simplify the day into an entrance. He does not waste strength on resentment. He notes it, files it, and drinks water slowly. The point was never applause. The point was mourning. Morning has arrived, and he is still in it. He requests facts and receives them like stones placed in his palm. Stannis lives. His army retreats. The bay will taste of ash for a week. The city survived because chains rose and men held. The result does not belong to one person. It belongs to a pattern of decisions that, taken together, created room for the human will to work. Tyrion takes comfort in the plain arithmetic of that. Effort yielded effect. Design contained damage. By evening, the lanes are half cleared, and the first carts venture toward the piers. Tyrion sits upright and refuses a mirror. He knows what scars do. They edit rooms on your behalf. He prefers to write his own introduction, and when he cannot, he prefers to walk in and change the subject. He thanks the maester who kept him breathing, recognizes the guards who did not run, and asks for news of the common folk before news of nobles. Word arrives that the king has resumed public delight and private boredom. Cersei rides the new narrative like a practiced horsewoman, and Tywin resumes the seat of gravity. Tyrion exhales, a sound without self-pity, and asks for the lists of the dead. He marks names who will need help, messages that must be sent, replacements that can preserve rhythm. Victory does not end the work, it defines its next steps. He sleeps at last, as if curled beside a furnace door, warm, aching, and aware of every hinge when he shifts. In the drift between waking and rest, he visits the chain in his mind and thanks each craftsman again. He does not believe in luck the way some use the word. He believes in preparedness, meeting a scene and making it survivable. The river slows, the city coughs and clears its throat. Tomorrow will need the same patience as yesterday. Morning brings formal gratitude that feels like a polite disguise over something less generous. Tyrion receives it with a steady face, neither inviting pity nor rejecting thanks. He sees where his usefulness has frightened people who prefer their influence unmeasured and their stories uncomplicated. He understands the next campaign will not be on water or wall, but in corridors where talk moves faster than thought. He tells himself gently to keep walking. The Blackwater writes its own history in green echoes across a generation. For Tyrion, it becomes a test answered, a problem solved with less loss than the alternative. He does not make it a crown, because crowns pinch. He makes it a note in the margin. When the day demanded more than one answer, he had two ready. That is the work. That is enough. The city breathes, and somewhere bakery fires are lit again. Success tastes like bread. He allows himself one slow breath beside the window. Below, the river moves on, carrying ash and whispers, and the walls remember the hands that held them. Chapter 8. Scars and Shadows, the Cost of Victory. Recovery is not a trumpet. It is bandage linen, broth, and patience lifted cup by cup. Tyrion wakes to a city that has resumed its arguments with smaller words. Craftsmen mend what heat unmade. Fishermen test water that still murmurs of fire. He sits upright slowly and learns a new face in the mirror of others' eyes, a face now carrying a line that redirects attention before he speaks. Tywin rides through gates to claim the narrative, and courtiers adjust allegiance like birds changing formation. The songs make simple work of a complex day. Tyrion recognizes the rhythm and allows it to pass through him without catching. He thanks those who carried him from danger and sends notes to widows whose names deserve more than a list. He visits damaged wards and listens longer than he talks. Listening becomes an honorable chore. The small council reconvenes with altered gravity. Tywin at the head, Cersei sharp to his right, and Tyrion moved to a smaller chair that nonetheless fits his spine. Petitions arrive tugging at purse strings that have already been stretched. Littlefinger leaves a vacancy in the office that counts and calms coin. Tyrion accepts the keys to the realm's accounts because keys, even to indebted rooms, are tools he knows how to use. He opens ledgers and finds stories told in numbers, promises borrowed from various tomorrows, interest fattened by neglect, and debts to the Iron Bank of Bravos that will not forget. The faith has been soothed with gifts that did not exist. The crown swims while pretending to stand. Tyrion does not blame ghosts. He sets quills scratching, converts fancy into column, and drafts schedules that reduce panic from a bonfire to a candle. He visits the warehouses that feed the capital and marks how a single corrupt buyer can starve 3 streets. He replaces them with clerks whose reputations are dull and whose handwriting is clear. He chooses transport routes that avoid bottlenecks created by pride. When a lordling complains, Tyrion offers him the pleasure of being part of the solution, then hands him a list that proves it. Some egos are best fed with work that matters. Shay becomes more difficult to hide Not because she shouts, but because shadows thin when power shifts. Tyrion keeps her close against his judgment and keeps his judgment close against his heart. Their rooms are an island in a loud sea. They speak of escape sometimes, a small house somewhere green, and the conversation serves as a window even when neither believes the frame will hold. Hope does not have to be probable to be useful. Joffrey's entertainments continue, and Tyrion redirects as he can, placing cushions where sharp corners wait. He has learned the limits of his influence. He uses it anyway. He drafts agreements with guilds that trade applause for infrastructure, funds a granary roof in exchange for mundane loyalty, and surrounds the throne with competence that does not wear masks. It is not a romance. It is a renovation done while the family refuses to move out. There are visits he must make, and people he must soothe. The faith wants coin steadied. The merchants want protection priced honestly. The watch wants pay that arrives before resentment does. Tyrion moves through each ask with the same principle. Promise what can be kept and keep it exactly. He avoids the kind of lie that rots future trust. He remembers the wall, the eyrie, the chain, and lets each teach the next errand. At night, he reads in bed with wine at hand, and the city's hum as company. He returns to histories where rulers mistook noise for victory and accountants corrected them with famine statistics. He copies one sentence: "To rule is to choose the next shortage." He sets it on his table where anyone can see it. People behave better when the truth sits in the center of the room like a chair no one can move. Tywin's presence condenses decision into fewer mouths. He holds court with efficiency that saves the realm coin and costs it warmth. Tyrion navigates a father's orbit by measuring when to speak and when to accept that the shape of love offered will not change. He shrinks some of his hopes to a size he can carry without tearing them, and he focuses on work that meets mourning in working order. The city must look like reliability. The day arrives when he is told he must marry. Politics, not preference, places Sansa Stark's name in his path. Tyrion hears the logic that pretends to be destiny, a union to anchor the north, to secure claims with rings rather than raids. He also hears the girl's quiet dread underneath. He agrees because refusing would not save her from worse, and because he can control at least one variable: his own behavior. He decides on kindness as doctrine. Before the vows, he visits the counting rooms once more, tightening any cord that might slip while attention wanders. He arranges Myrcella's stipend, confirms the baker contracts, and instructs the harbor master on a fair schedule for moorings. He prefers to leave systems, not impressions. People forget speeches. They remember when the grain arrives on time. If he is to divert his days to ceremony, he wants the city to forgive the interruption. On the evening before the wedding, he sits alone for a time and permits grief to knock quietly. He thinks of choices that were illusions and illusions that were useful, and he pours a small measure for a version of himself who wanted different rooms. Then he caps the bottle, writes 2 more letters that will make tomorrow easier for strangers, and goes to meet the fate that wears silk and politics. A scar itches. He does not scratch it. The morning is a procession taught its steps generations ago. Sansa walks with composure that costs her. Tyrion offers restraint, where triumph would be cruelty. At the feast, he refuses humiliation as entertainment, sliding away from games designed to reduce both of them. His decision is simple. He will not add to the weight she carries. Later, in a chamber that expects consummation, he chooses a chair instead of a bed and a promise instead of a demand. He knows what people will say and chooses to be smaller than their need for a story. Quiet vows count too. He tells Sansa she will not be forced now or ever, and means it cleanly. The candles seem to burn warmer after that, or perhaps that is simply relief taking shape as light. Outside, The city keeps breathing. Inside, two people who did not ask for this night practice a kind of mercy that does not need witnesses. The days that follow are careful. Tyrion treats gossip as weather and work as shelter. He keeps the crown's coin honest and the council's ambitions contained, and he watches for danger that does not wear armor. Shay's temper spikes at the edges of secrecy. Sansa's grief moves like a tide he does not try to command. He does not succeed at everything. He keeps trying, and sometimes trying prevents harm that arrogance would invite. In the evenings, he walks the ramparts and studies how lanterns reveal and conceal in alternating patches. He thinks of the chain, the wildfire, the grain accounts, and the marriages that are also treaties. He weighs the cost of each decision not only to himself, but to those who cannot steer. This is what he can offer the world. Care that reaches past his skin. He holds to that when all other banners tug. There are rumors of feasts to come and alliances sealed with wine. He does not trust feasts. He trusts morning bread and letters sent on time. Still, when invitations arrive, he attends because absence writes its own stories. He plans his exits, arranges small protections for those who might be forgotten, and keeps his balance on polished floors. The scar along his face has taught him about edges. The city, steadied for a while, keeps going. He breathes, thanks the night, and keeps the lantern lit. Chapter 9. The Marriage Knot. Sansa, Shay, and Mercy. The city shakes off the last ash of victory and resumes its appetite for theater. Tyrion learns the new choreography of being both visible and politely dismissed, a husband in name and a steward in practice. Sansa moves through rooms like a belle in cloth, her quiet catching on doorways. Shay waits behind a door that mocks privacy. Between these two worlds, Tyrion balances a lantern carried through alleys that do not share light. He builds routine because routine steadies. Mornings for letters and coin, afternoons for petitions and officials, evenings for the civil, the difficult, and the domestic. He makes gentleness a habit where he can and a rule where he must. With Sansa, he offers space she can fill with whatever courage wants to wear that day. With Shay, he offers laughter that tries too hard and tenderness that does not argue with the hour. At court, Cersei cultivates victories counted in glances. Joffrey plays king as if pain were applause. Tyrion edits danger into delay and delay into revision. He backs merciful decisions with reasons that matter to those who never see tapestries. Grain moves, ships dock, cobblers get paid, and in a dozen small ways, the city is less cruel than it could be. This is how he understands duty. Subtract harm, then subtract it again. He brings Sansa small facts that might make the day smoother. Which halls are quieter at dusk? Which scepters can be trusted? Which words travel fastest? He does not demand gratitude. He sets his care down like bread on a table and steps back. She thanks him sometimes with a look that respects effort even without belief. It is enough. They are two people in a contract designed to use them. Mercy is their rebellion. Shay is fire in a room designed for calm. Her love is complicated by the coin that started it, sharpened by the secrets that sustain it. Tyrion understands the trap and walks through it because it is warm. He tries to protect her with placement and gifts, which he translates as distance and doubt. Their talk loops. He cannot fix the translation without showing her to the world, and showing her to the world would break them both. News travels. A royal wedding is planned. A feast layered with debt and performance. Tyrion manages costs that others consider beneath notice, because he has seen how crushed grapes and missing candles turn into hungry streets. He redirects funds toward roofs and granaries, hiding kindness in arithmetic where spectacle cannot steal it back. People who prefer banners to budgets call him joyless. He lets the insult rest. Joy that eats children is not joy. He dines with Sansa on quiet nights, speaking of gardens, ships, and stories instead of walls that listen. She speaks of Winterfell in sentences that land like prayer. He does not touch her hands unless she reaches first. In this, he keeps a promise and gives them both a little room. He thinks often of the saddle he once sketched and the boy who rode again. Sometimes help is simply the refusal to make hurt larger. In the counting rooms, he finds satisfaction in clean totals and escort deliveries that arrive when people expect them. He alters contracts so that craftsmen are paid sooner and then watches productivity rise as though hope were a lubricant. He hires a young clerk whose calm dwarfs the ledgers he carries. The city's heartbeat evens. Tyrion takes that small music as proof his hours have weight beyond his stature. It is the sort of data he trusts. Shae refuses endurance. She wants a life that is not a hallway and a love that is not a calculation. Tyrion wants the same. The map will not agree. He tries to move her to a safer post, a household where her laughter would not echo against knives. She hears only banishment. Hurt compresses the room. He leaves before words say something they cannot unsay. Silence, he has learned, can be repair when speech would be shrapnel. The wedding approaches with the slow certainty of a tide. The city polishes its mirrors and its malice. Tyrion prepares his manners like armor and his exits like maps. He instructs the kitchens to send casks where bread will run short after the feast. He writes once more to Dawn about Myrcella, encouraging the steadying habits that keep children safe. He checks the watch payroll twice. He goes to sleep before midnight and wakes before dawn. On the morning of the purple hangings and rich wines, he reminds himself that survival often means letting noise pass. He will not win applause. He will try to keep harm to a minimum. The hall fills with color that tastes expensive. Music makes the walls seem closer. Sansa stands beside him in a dress that makes grief look like frost. They walk in step because they must. He chooses his words as if they have weight. They do. The day turns, as days sometimes do, without asking permission. A sudden collapse, a confusion of cups, and silence pressed flat by shock. Tyrion's world narrows to the few facts he can trust. He did not do this. The room does not care, and the crown prefers a villain it already knows. The king is dead. The hall needs a culprit. People turn their heads as if by a single wire. Hands find him like a script. He is seized, accused, and paraded across the same stones he arranged to keep honest. Sansa vanishes in a flurry of speculation. Shae's absence cuts without explanation. Cersei's grief hardens instantly into purpose and points at him. Tyrion looks at the floor to find balance, then looks up because indignation cannot hold his spine. He says little. His words are no longer counted as measure. He is led away under banners he never wanted to wear. In the cell, he feels the old tilt of the sky cell without the sky. He breathes, thinks of breadlines, then forces himself to think of nothing, then of something small and good, then of the next motion that belongs to him. He will ask for trial. He will stand in front of the same room and let it try to turn his voice against him. He will arrange his courage the way he arranges accounts, line by line, cleanly. The city continues without him, which is part of the injury and part of the comfort. He has built a few systems that do not need his hand each hour, and they keep moving. In that, there is a hint that work done well is a friend that visits even when you cannot leave your bed. He waits. Waiting is not passive when a mind is stocking shelves for the day it reopens. He keeps breathing. Chapter 10. purple wine, black-celled trial and despair. The throne room fills with memory dressed as certainty. Witnesses speak, and their sentences arrive polished by fear or favor. Jokes Tyrion once used as shields are turned to spears with new tips. He listens as if learning a language that rejects grammar, then asks to answer in the one dialect left to him. Trial by combat. The old law returns, and the room tenses toward spectacle, as if hunger had a sound. He cannot carry a sword to victory, but he can choose who might. Offers arrive and fade. Bronn counts costs and declines, with a frankness that refuses false drama. Then Prince Oberyn of Dorne steps forward, his calm threaded with old grief. He wants justice for a sister whose story still cuts the air, and he believes the duel can deliver judgment where the court will not. Tyrion accepts with the humility of a man borrowing time. The day of the fight arrives cool under a hard sky. Tyrion sits with hands that will not stop remembering other rooms. The arena speaks the oldest conversation, weight and angle, and for a while it seems worded in Oberyn's favor. Then a miscalculation, a swift reversal, and hope breaks with a sound he will hear in sleep. The verdict reappears, wearing a different face, and the old law closes like a door. He is sentenced, death delivered tastefully after a waiting period, as if cruelty must be polite to be valid. He spends the next hours with an arithmetic of options that tallies to 0. Anger tries to be captain. He refuses at command. He names what he can still control: breath, posture, the words he will not give them, the piece of himself that remembers the boy who drew maps to free his mind from walls. Night brings a visitor who moves like memory. Jaime enters the cell with keys and a story he cannot unwind back to the start. He offers escape. Tyrion, who has practiced believing and not believing in the same minute, chooses trust that tastes like rain after ash. They move through tunnels that smell of water and secrets. Each turn is familiar to someone who learned long ago to survive by studying routes nobody else thought interesting. On the way, a detour opens that is not on any map. Tyrion steps through a door and into a room that answers long questions with short, brutal clarity. We pass lightly over details. A betrayal becomes a struggle becomes a silence. He keeps moving, now carrying a weight that will not become lighter, only farther away. Some choices are not clean. Some consequences do not announce their end. He finds his father where power keeps its furniture. Tywin sits as if the chair belonged to him from birth. Tyrion speaks the words that need saying, measured but not mild. A crossbow hangs at a ridiculous angle between prop and instrument. The confrontation is a lifetime's worth of grammar compressed into blunt sentences. One bolt, then another. An argument ends that never admitted it was won. Tyrion leaves before the echoes decide to stay. Varys takes him in, the quietest part of the night, welcoming the loudest part of his choices. They speak little because words have been overused that day. A crate becomes a ship waiting to happen, and the plan wears anonymity like armor. Tyrion climbs in, smaller than freight, but heavier with consequences than any grain. The lid closes, and with it, a chapter written in redacted lines, and the exactness of necessity. The sea receives him without ceremony. In the dark hold, he learns a new quiet, one that does not judge and does not absolve, only persists. He makes an inventory of what he still has, a mind that will not yield to despair, a talent for adjusting plans in motion, the memory of people he tried to protect, and the unspent desire to make something work in a world that flinches from order. The ship breathes. So does he. At a harbor far from the capital's perfumes, the crate opens, and the air tastes new. Exile is not a ceremony. it is a blank ledger. Varys advises caution, and then vanishes like punctuation at the end of a long clause. Tyrion steps into a city that does not know him and asks for nothing. He will have to borrow names until he earns one that cannot be sold. The work begins with water and direction. Each street teaches him its verbs. Barter, vanish, endure. He finds a place to sit that does not invite questions and a tavern that trades in information more carefully than in wine. He hears of a queen across the sea who balances dragons against policy. The rumor sits in him like a coin warming in the hand. A mind like his requires a project that faces forward. He angles himself toward Meereen without pretending it will be simple. This is not triumph. It is survival with intention, a line walked by a man who has seen how easily stories devour facts. He keeps the few he trusts, that systems matter, that mercy survives if protected, that humor helps the medicine go down without turning it into poison. He leaves behind what would rot him. In a small room he cannot yet call safe, he sleeps. The ship that carried him out carries other cargo in. The world, as always, keeps moving. Morning offers a slow light that does not ask questions. Tyrion eats plain food and studies a map that is mostly blank in the places he will need. He sharpens his tools, questions, patience, attention, because steel can be confiscated and wit cannot. The next chapter waits across water and hazard. He folds his grief into a smaller shape and tucks it away. Across the narrow sea, a queen is said to be listening. He will learn how to speak, so she hears. Chapter 11. A crossbow in the dark. Escape from the capital. The crate breathes like a slow animal. Wooden ribs creaking with each roll of the ship. Tyrion keeps still and lets the dark be a blanket, not a cage. He has left a father on a chair and a life behind a door, and neither will follow him here. He counts the ship's turns, the stops and starts, the voices at dock. A new coastline will be a different sentence, and he means to read it slowly. When the lid lifts at last, night air carries salt, tar, and the rumor of rain. Varys's eyes are careful, his voice softer than the harbor. We must be quick, he says, and he means quiet. So Tyrion saves questions for later. Roads within the city thread like a net, and they choose alleys with fewer knots. A warehouse swallows them whole and gives them safety for a night. Exile is math without landmarks. Tyrion inventories what he truly owns, his wary humor, a talent for noticing what rooms are for, and a willingness to begin at the bottom again. He has coin because someone thought ahead, but coin solves less than attention does. He eats bread, drinks water, and lets sleep come without argument. Morning is a gentle verdict, and he accepts it. Varys arranges passage east with a merchant who appreciates silence bought in advance. In cramped quarters that smell of rope and spices, Tyrion listens to sailors file the hours into neat stacks. He adds his own labor to the day by learning names and tides. He marks how captains think about risk and how crewmen read a sky. In this, the sea becomes a patient tutor. In Pentos, palaces gleam behind private walls, while streets mind their own business. Tyrion keeps a low profile and a higher curiosity. The news that reaches him travels by cups and cards. A queen in Meereen rules with dragons and conundrums, and even her supporters disagree about order and mercy. Tyrion drinks slowly and measures the distance between story and fact. He and Varys part with a promise to meet again in usefulness. Tyrion travels as a passenger inside his own life, riding a wagon through sunlight that refuses to judge. A roadside inn sells soup with too much onion, and he smiles because onion is better than hunger. He looks toward Meereen as a man looks toward a library with the light still on. The road bends because roads always do. At a river town, a stranger studies him longer than courtesy permits. Jorah Mormont names him aloud and takes him without fuss, a kidnap that pretends to be rescue. Tyrion does not waste breath on outrage. He asks for terms and receives a plan disguised as hope. Be a gift to the queen, earn a hearing, trade luck for leverage. The scheme is blunt and practical. It will do. They travel by skiff past mossy banks and stilt houses that lean like tired men. Tyrion keeps talking because silence would become surrender, and he is not done negotiating with the world. He tells Jorah stories that carry maps inside them. He becomes briefly a person rather than a package. When storms blow, they reach for rope at the same moment. Alliance finds foothold in shared effort. Capture interrupts capture. Slavers cut the river like knives and decide both men will become goods. Tyrion offers them words when coin will not serve. He sells the notion that a dwarf is lucky in a show, and luck has a price. He measures the disgust in his own mouth and swallows because survival is a currency with strict exchange rates. Jorah watches, learns, and says nothing he does not mean. The sea smells different as they close on Slaver's Bay, old salt and older sorrow. Sails crowd the horizon like unmade decisions. Tyrion rehearses the moment he will ask not for mercy, but for purpose. Meereen rises pale against hot wind, mosaics bright where law needs color to persuade. He will not demand a throne, or a title, or a pardon. He will offer an instrument the queen can use. Chapter 12. Across the narrow sea toward Daenerys. The throne room in Meereen is tiled with stories, each square a fragment of old certainty. Tyrion stands there travel-stained, hands open, and introduces himself without apology. Daenerys listens with the concentration of a flame-learning restraint. He speaks of mistakes measured and futures purchased in small, expensive steps. He does not flatter dragons. He praises the patience that keeps them fed and sleeping. She tests him at once by asking what he would do with a city that has torn up its roots. He answers in plain language: pull slower, plant deeper, water the ground you wish to keep. Free people need wages and security as much as oaths and banners. He suggests wine for the old families and jobs for their sons, not because he owes them peace, but because peace is cheaper than victory repeated weekly. They share a quiet understanding. Law without mercy becomes terror. Mercy without law becomes drift. Tyrion frames choices so cause leads to effect with fewer surprises. He asks for the chance to prove he can be useful in days, not in legends. Daenerys, who has wrestled with absolutes, weighs the modesty in his request and the precision in his answers. She grants him a seat that is not a throne and a task that is not simple. The sons of the Harpy make their case with knives, haunting alleys that distrust sunlight. Tyrion studies where attacks repeat and where they never do. He sees how grievance uses beauty as cover and how symbols feed fear. He walks markets under light guard, buying dates from the same vendor until routine becomes protection. He funds lanterns along a route that has known too much dusk. Small brightness can interrupt a habit of shadows. He visits the Dragon Vault because it is a problem no rhetoric can solve. Bars and chains keep power quiet, but at a cost that the city can smell. Tyrion steps near with reverence that is not worship and speaks softly to creatures that understand tone, if not words. He asks permission, not forgiveness, and offers trust in measured inches. The dragons accept his presence, and the goats he arranged. He leaves with his eyebrows intact and a strategy taking shape. Peace cannot be sold to people whose pride is their last income. Tyrion invites 3 masters to talk across a table rather than across corpses. He offers them a transition no one will cheer, and many can live through. End the trade you call natural, he says, but allow time for other trades to grow. The compromise is ugly and exact. It will be hated briefly and then used daily. He plans for outrage and for enforcement both. Grey Worm speaks for the unsullied with calm that ignores boasts. Missandei interprets more than words. She interprets intent, and the room warms because truth is being told carefully. Together they make a council that can carry a difficult agreement to the streets without breaking it in the doorway. Tyrion reads their faces before signatures dry and decides he will earn their trust by checking on outcomes, not by claiming authorship. When Daenerys is pulled from the city by fate and flame, Tyrion is not promoted by celebration. He is left with a desk, a city, and 2 dragons who eat when they wish. He elects to survive by building habits. He sets meeting days and market days, creates a complaint hour that produces solutions faster than rebellions, and pays guards on the dot. Regularity becomes gospel in a place that has tasted command delivered only by outcry. He walks the embankments and lists repairs in a notebook stained with river water. He sends work crews where employment will double as patrol. He funds music in squares that used to host pain. He refuses to be sentimental about his success or despairing about his failures. Each evening he returns to the maps and the ledger, and he asks one question before sleep. Did the next shortage arrive on his terms or on its own? Word arrives like cool air that Daenerys still lives and the city holds its breath. Tyrion holds his own not with fear but with discipline. He knows that returns are more complicated than departures. He prepares to explain how he kept Meereen breathing without pretending he cured its fevers. He knows she will come home with fire. He intends to answer with proof that water is also a gift. Chapter 13. Meereen puzzles. Peace, trade, and compromise. Morning in Meereen begins with kiln smoke and bargaining. Tyrion receives a list of small fires and decides which will burn out and which will spread. He answers 5 complaints before noon, and 2 of those answers are apologies wrapped around instructions. Compromise is not romance. It is a series of tolerable losses that add up to fewer funerals. He keeps the math in front of him, not in his pocket. The agreement with the masters is a bridge built in wind. It creaks, groans, and threatens to toss travelers into the river of old habits. Tyrion reinforces it with strict schedules, visible enforcement, and quiet generosity toward those harmed by the change. When a freedman shouts that betrayal wears silk, Tyrion invites him to the counting room. He shows him grain delivered, guards reassigned, and fines levied on men who once paid bribes instead. Facts do not warm the heart, but they warm kitchens. Grey Worm distrusts the masters because he has earned that right at spear point. Tyrion does not ask him to like the plan, only to measure its outcomes. Missandei watches Tyrion with a scholar's caution, ready to translate the city back to him if he grows abstract. Together, they keep Meereen from falling into simple stories. The harpy still stabs where lanterns don't reach, but the patrol routes grow smarter with each report, and some corners go a week without blood. Visitors arrive from Korth and Volantis with chests heavy enough to bend counsel. Tyrion accepts coin that binds those cities to Meereen's new markets and refuses gifts that smell of chains. He makes festivals duller and safer and convinces brewers to sponsor public fountains. He reduces curfews by an hour and doubles patrols near bakeries. People sleep earlier when bread waits for them at dawn. Peace is a habit taught in gentle increments. He speaks with priests because belief runs faster than law. He tells them parables about a city that needs both hearth fires and wells and invites them to bless new cisterns. He does not compete with their gods and does not let them compete with the work. The balance holds. He meets small guilds in small rooms and leaves them with schedules posted on doors. Quiet order spreads the way ivy does. Slowly and everywhere a wall will let it. The masters test the truce because power without testing grows soft. They fund agitators, buy knives, and measure the city's pulse with cruelty. Tyrion answers with audits, targeted seizures, and a public case built on ledgers rather than slogans. He does not ask the people to love the truce. He asks them to notice which nights are now quiet and which mornings keep their markets. He gives them numbers to tell their neighbors when rumors arrive hungry. Then ships appear on the horizon, full of men who prefer the past. The siege begins with drums that pretend to be destiny. Tyrion stands at the wall and estimates distances he can no longer close with talk. He orders evacuations from the shoreline, moves food inward, and keeps water flowing towards that panic fastest. He tells the council the truth without adjectives. The city is strong enough to bend, not to break. They will hold until help arrives, or until a new plan appears. Help arrives with wings. Daenerys returns on the breath of a dragon, and the air forgets how to be patient. She walks into the council chamber wearing the day like a promise, and Tyrion meets her gaze with the calm of a clerk who kept the books balanced while the owner was away. He admits the truce's failures and its small successes. He does not defend error. He explains it, then steps aside for the queen to choose scale. When the masters send envoys, Dany replies with a demonstration that is both theater and strategy. One ship becomes instruction, ash turning lesson into sky. Tyrion watches for overreach, then nods when restraint ends at the shoreline. The city cheers the clarity. Varys returns with news shaped like opportunities, and sails are counted not as threats, but as transport. Meereen has learned something hard: how to breathe during decisions made above its head. In the quiet that follows, Daenerys considers the problem of ruling a place she cannot remain in. Tyrion offers governance as a service that continues even as banners move. He proposes a council of locals supervised by people who are boring in the best way. He writes procedures that carry fairness from one market day to the next. He appoints scribes who prefer ink's permanence to the thrill of sudden power, and then he waits to see if daily life will obey. It does, imperfectly, which is the correct degree. Dany sees it, feels the machinery humming instead of smoking, and recognizes the usefulness that hides behind Tyrion's undramatic posture. She pins a small silver brooch to his chest, the hand symbol, and says aloud what work has already proved. He bows his head, not out of false modesty, but out of respect for the tool she has made him. He will keep time while dragons make weather. Chapter 14. Hand of the Dragon. Plans, proof, and winter. Dragonstone greets them with salt air and the careful geometry of a fortress built for storms. Tyrion spreads maps on a table scored by older strategies, and the room's windows frame a churning sea. He advises patience to a queen who commands fire, arguing that rule built on ash must be rebuilt every season. Dany listens, her palm on cool stone, and agrees to win with fewer pyres. The choice feels like competence, not timidity. Allies gather according to old loyalties and new arithmetic. Yara Greyjoy brings ships and restless energy. Elaria Sand brings a wound disguised as pride. Olenna Tyrell brings truth with thorns. Tyrion arranges plans that reward discipline. Unsullied will strike at Casterly Rock, where his name counts doors as if they were memories. Dornish and Ironborn will seal the sea roads, starving the lions without burning their city. The plan reads clean, like a sum that should resolve, but plans must pass through people. Euron Greyjoy writes his answer in splintered hulls, and the sea withdraws what it had lent. The unsullied Claimstone Tyrion knows too well and find it worth less than expected. Lannister soldiers empty the rock with a courtesy that insults maps. Highgarden falls with the quiet of a great tree felled by men who measured it first. Olenna drinks an ending of her own choosing and leaves a fact that will not die with her. Tyrion receives each reversal with a stillness that shelters decision. He revises. He counts troops that will not be replaced quickly, supplies that can be moved faster than armies, and the cost of insisting on pride. He counsels Dany to keep her dragons as deterrent longer, to be storm only at the right time, and to make the realm imagine her as builder. She hears, then recognizes a moment when mercy would become weakness. She rides on a field gone to dust and thistle. Fire meets a Lannister convoy. Tyrion watches from a ridge as grain and men ignite, a harvest turned to testimony. His heart argues with his math. The victory is clear and cruel, the warning undeniable. He walks the burnt earth afterward and memorizes the smell, because memory refuses to let strategy be only numbers. When a defeated lord refuses allegiance, Dany chooses flame again. Tyrion holds his breath and exhales later, in private. He finds himself between urgencies. Stop short of terror, reach far enough to end a war. He urges the queen to consider the day after each choice, the repairs that will define her, the letters she wishes written about her reign. She hears him more often than not, which is as much as any counselor may hope. When a king from the north arrives speaking of a threat that dismisses borders, Tyrion recognizes the shape of truth carried by an unlikely messenger. Jon Snow brings winter into the map room, not only as season but as expansion of stakes. Tyrion helps the conversation avoid Pride's cliffs. He arranges for Dragonglass to be mined, for agreements that do not treat trust as a gamble, but as an investment. He sees in Jon a stubbornness that may be useful if it learns how to bend. He sees in Dany a hunger for recognition that must be fed without turning into famine. He introduces them to each other's better natures. Proof is demanded by those who will not accept warning as reason. Tyrion shapes a plan that asks for a relic from the dark, a captured wight to terrify sense into those who will not borrow it. He dislikes everything about the idea except its necessity. He arranges passage, supplies, and a hope that follows duty at a distance. The venture costs more than intended. A dragon dies to ice and is reborn as Winter's Horn. The survivors carry a single truth across miles. The meeting at the Dragonpit in King's Landing is a pageant of caution. Tyrion walks through ruins built for spectacle and remembers the day he bled for this city. He presents the proof without flourish, letting the undead explain themselves. Fear does its honest work. Cersei performs assent and hides refusal behind familiar walls. Tyrion meets with Jaime in a room that smells of the past and shapes a truce that hopes to outlast a lie. He wants it to be enough for a season. Back on Dragonstone, he counts the cost in names he writes small so they fit. He tells Dany that winning the future will require surviving the present without becoming indistinguishable from those they replace. He repeats it because repetition is sometimes mercy. He watches Jon's regard for Dany turn from respect to attachment and prepares himself for the arithmetic that follows. When heart adds numbers poorly, he knows love can be an accelerant. He prays it will be a bridge. Winter pushes its hand across the map. The wall groans under a weight that does not bargain. Tyrion cleans quills and oils hinges because he cannot kill the night, but he can keep doors useful. He believes in small labors that meet great tides. He has worn the hand's brooch in 2 cities now, and he has learned that the symbol warms no one by itself. It is the work, measured daily, that becomes heat. He sets logs aside for morning. Chapter 15. Bells and Ash. Breaking with a queen. At Dragonstone, the wind scrapes the battlements, and news arrives colder than spray. Missandei is gone, taken from them on a wall where promises could not reach. Grief tightens the queen's voice and thins her sleep. Varys moves like a man who has chosen treason as a sacrament. He writes to ravens with hands that have known this ink for years. Tyrion sees it, names it, and brings it to the person it will harm most. Aye, he tells Daenerys because trust requires it, and because the realm she hopes to build cannot stand on a secret war between her and her counselor. She receives the truth with a composure that frightens him more than rage would. Varys is given a final chance to explain the geometry of his loyalties. And then the sentence arrives, swift and public. Fire obeys her. Tyrion watches a friend become ash under a sky that does not intervene. He chooses to stay, even after every reason to stay is questioned. Supplies dwindle, allies falter, and the city ahead is the same city where he first traded terror for tactics. Tyrion asks for clemency before the gates are tested. He pleads for bells to be treated as surrender, streets as vulnerable, and victory as a future that must be lived in. Dany looks through him as if sighted on a point beyond. He understands ambition and trauma arguing in one body. He begs anyway, because begging is sometimes a form of service. He finds Jaime in chains, a twin reduced to one decision that still matters. Tyrion frees his brother and draws a map that leads to escape by boat. The hug they share is a bench in a storm. Jaime will try to save Cersei, a choice that makes and unmakes him every time. Tyrion's gratitude is a sentence built on old debts and the knowledge that none of this will be called wisdom by anyone who counts victories like coins. It is love. Anyway, the army forms lines before King's Landing, and the city answers with shutters, sobs, and silence. Tyrion finds a vantage point that punishes him with sight. He listens for bells he helped argue into significance. He believes the sound will lift a hand inside the dragon rider and turn it from clenched to open. When the bells finally ring, they carry relief like water carried to a fire. And then, the fire refuses to go out. Daenerys chooses to keep burning after surrender, flame running down avenues that had planned only to outlast the day. Tyrion watches the calculation leave the act and knows that grief has chosen its own proof. He feels responsibility as heat on his face, and as a weight he can not to put down. He thinks of the boy he sketched a saddle for, of bread lines he kept short, of jokes that stopped knives, and wonders how a man keeps faith when an oath breaks of its own accord. He does not speak aloud, because his voice would be as small as a bird against the roar. He moves where he can, saves no one by moving, and knows it. The city becomes ash in ridges and alcoves, and the survivors look upward for mercy that does not arrive. When the day ends, it ends like a book closed too hard. Tyrion walks through streets he once measured with fairness and counts what cannot be counted. The hand's brooch weighs like a verdict. In the ruins, he seeks his family not because he has forgiven them, but because endings should be witnessed. He finds stone instead of faces, and the quiet is obscene. Love has been terrible and constant in the Lannister house. He lets it pass through him without rearranging the furniture. He sets the brooch at Daenerys' feet later, like a man laying down a hammer after the house he tried to repair has been burned by its owner. She orders him held. He accepts the cell as a room that tells him the truth. Jon Snow visits, carrying a decision that will break him either way it falls. Tyrion does not incite. He observes. He asks Jon to consider the world as it will be sung about if nothing is done. and the world as it might be if duty cuts through desire. He speaks of children because politics lives in their mornings. He does not promise an easy absolution. He asks for a hard act in the service of gentler decades. Jon leaves with something heavier than a sword. The next day ends a war no one wanted to fight and begins a quiet that feels like empty shelves. A dragon carries grief into a sky that resembles unmade paper. Tyrion walks out to what used to be a throne room and what is now a memory. He does not celebrate. He does what he has always done when the room refuses to hold its shape. He proposes a meeting. Talk cannot repair this alone, but talk might prevent the next forgetting. Soldiers collect themselves. Ash settles like stubborn fog. Tyrion waits for a place where words might be permitted to start again. He has less certainty than ever and more need for work than before. The bells are an echo now, arguing with their own meaning. He holds to one last habit that has saved him more often than it should. Choose the next honest step, make it, and let morning judge it kindly. Chapter 16. The Choice of Stories. Dragonpit and Quiet Ledger. The Dragonpit gathers people who once spoke only through envoys and trumpets. Now they sit on fallen stone and consider an emptiness that asks to be filled. Tyrion, unshaven and unarmed, is given the floor as if failure has made him lighter. He does not pretend he has a plan. He offers an observation instead. Kingdoms endure on the stories they choose to serve, not the names stamped on coins. He suggests a king who will not command by fear or appetite. He speaks of Bran, a boy who cannot march at the head of an army, but can remember the paths that led everyone here. Memory, he argues, is a stabilizer. It humbles and guides. A ruler who holds the realm's past without hunger for its treasures might keep the great families from spending another generation on funerals. The gathered lords shift, question, and then do the arithmetic that pride often complicates. Consensus arrives like a bird that lands because no one lunged too quickly. Bran accepts with the calm of a tree listening to wind. He names Tyrion his hand, not because the city loves him, but because the city needs someone who understands leaks, books, and stubborn habits. Tyrion accepts not as reward, but as labor. He begins the same afternoon, when grief still stains every voice. He asks for lists, tools, and permission to be boring for an extended period. The council laughs briefly, and then finds chairs. The small council changes shape and tone. Davos brings ships and salt-tested patience. Brienne brings honor in disciplined hands. Bronn, newly rich, brings an education in pressure applied to rails and wallets. Samwell arrives with bound pages and a heart that believes in learning. A new master of whisperers is chosen with a promise to whisper less and listen more. Tyrion assigns tasks in sentences that do not flatter and do not humiliate. He knows the work will be the proof. Water first. He orders canals cleared and sewers mapped as if the future depended on unglamorous puddles. It does. He funds pumps where buckets once failed and hires engineers who prefer sums to speeches. He reduces tariffs on lumber to invite rebuilding without punishing hope. He enforces standards in bakeries so that the bread weighs what the chalkboard says. He does not issue a proclamation about kindness. He makes it cheaper than cruelty. He revises the city's rhythms. Market days are staggered to thin crowds, apprenticeships paired with stipends so fathers can say yes, and trials scheduled on a timetable that prevents jail from becoming habit. He sets up a complaints court where the first remedy is explanation and the second is action. He closes 3 corrupt offices and opens 2 useful ones, which is, by his count, progress. He chases away a few old ghosts by switching locks that they would have known in their sleep. He pays the watch when he promises to, and with the amount he promised. He retrains a handful who confuse authority with theater and promotes those who keep streets safe without noise. He invests in lights along routes that used to belong to fear. He funds teachers who can subtract and midwives who can listen. He supports a guild of builders who record what they learned so the next fire will find them ready. He buys barrels, sails, ink, and time. In the Red Keep, scaffolds climb while debates loop. Bronn delights in arguing for brothels before bridges, a joke that covers a real claim about revenue. Tyrion lets the joke land, then points to the numbers. Bridges first, he says, and brothels when the budget allows. Davos snorts approval. Sam notes details. Brienne raises one eyebrow that means both respect and caution. Meetings end on time and begin with the difficult matters. It is not glamorous. It is government. At night, Tyrion writes letters to people who will never meet him. He apologizes for delays he did not cause and thanks them for patience he did not deserve. He uses names whenever he can. He knows what it means to be seen exactly once by someone with power. He reads histories and refuses their fatalism. He believes, perhaps stubbornly, that a realm can choose a season of repair and like it enough to keep choosing. When bad news arrives, and it always does, he answers in order. Is anyone bleeding? Is anyone hungry? What can be done in an hour, a day, a month? He arranges solutions in that sequence, and the habit becomes morale. He does not chase applause, because applause does not patch a roof. He keeps the brooch because it reminds him that he asked for this weight and was trusted with it again when he least deserved trust. He intends to earn it every morning. Sometimes, near dusk, he returns to the room where the small council meets. Sunlight lays amber across the table, and the city outside sounds like water finding its level. He sits, fingers steepled without theater, and counts what is working. Fewer beggars at 3 corners, more ships on 2 tides, a festival without a single fight. He does not pretend these are victories worthy of song. He calls them days that did not fail their children. He ends as he began in truth, not with grandeur, but with care. Mornings measured clean, repairs before applause, memory kept honest, trust earned daily. As lamps dim and papers dry, he closes the ledger, lets the city breathe, and lets you drift in warm quiet.